Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Chidi's Soapbox, where I discuss issues affecting international students and things that can help you thrive within college and beyond. This week I'm going to share my story of how I saved so much money on my degree. I have been really looking forward to this because it's something that was really important to me. I know it was a big determinant of where I went to school and how I planned my classes and everyday stuff for me. And so I know many other people can make use of this, and I hope you can use these tips to graduate with the least cost possible. And so I'm going to go through my journey all the way from the beginning where I applied to schools up to my final year. And we're going to go through the numbers in much detail. I'm going to be sharing the numbers. They're just to be completely open with you and show you exactly how much you can save and how much things really cost. And not for any other reason. So I hope you can make use of it and get the best out of school for money. So the numbers show that from 2008 to about 2018, 2019, the average cost of school for domestic students in the US went up by 25 to 29%. And then for international students who pay an even more bigger amount for tuition and different costs, this amount was up to 42%. And so knowing these numbers and how difficult it is even for people here, I knew it was a daunting task from the beginning, and it was going to take a lot of resources from my family and everything. And so early in my process, the first step I had taken was writing my SATs. And so I wrote the SATs back in 2013 when it was still a 2400 scale. And just understanding where I fell among everything else helped me to determine what I was looking at. And so with my SATs, I scored about 2050 out of 2400, which is back on the old scale. And with each, the math and the reading sections graded over 750, I think. I got above 700 in those two. And then from my research, I could tell that many schools would be using just the math and the reading sections because the writing is more subjective. And honestly, in my case, the writing messed me up. If not, it could have been an even nicer number. But one thing to know from the beginning is that some scholarships will prefer to measure that. And I believe in the new system, those two count for more than the other ones. And so knowing that I was in this 2050 range helped me to know when I was looking for schools who would realistically be offering me something and which ones I wouldn't be getting into, for example. You can refer to my previous video about the whole process for selecting schools to apply to. But of course, one thing to look out for is the total price of the school for an international student, because it's different from a domestic student, and then possibly the availability of scholarships for international students. And so even with the scholarships, you want to look out for the total amount because you'll be looking at schools that are on the cheaper end. A $15,000 scholarship doesn't look the same at a school that's $30,000 per year and one that's $60,000 per year. There's still other stuff to balance apart from the scholarships themselves. And so knowing this can help you through sorting them and everything. And then you also want to look out for kind of the type of the scholarships. Some scholarships can be one-time scholarships, which means they are there for 1 year, versus recurring ones, which will be with you for your entire stay at the university. So with the recurring ones, it's like a contract. You get this amount of money every year, and they tell you, we're gonna waive this much of your tuition, for example. And so with these ones, you know that you're signing down, you're keeping your GPA about 3.0 or above, whatever the standard is, and you're going to keep on having that money as long as you're there, and you maintain their conditions as well. And so those ones are like the gold standard for peace of mind. Like once you know you're locked in for 4 years of the scholarship, then you know that you're not going to have to worry about too much afterwards. Depending on how things go, you may want more. So my initial research paid off like at the beginning of the whole process, because at the same time the schools were accepting me, my acceptance letters were coming with scholarship letters at the same time. So they were telling me, you're getting this much, you're locked in for 4 years, and you had to maintain this GPA or whatever. So among these schools that had sent me scholarships along with my admission letters, my two top choices were the University of Cincinnati and the University of South Florida. And for Cincinnati, which was about 44,000 a year flat for international students, they were going to give me about 60,000 for the whole 4 years, which is about 15,000 for each year, meaning that I would have to cover just a bit less than that amount. And so that was kind of one balance there. From USF, which was about 34,000 a year, I was promised, like, based on the SATs and everything, they had given me a certain scholarship, kind of two really, that were adding up. So there was like a presidential scholarship and one for being in the honors college separately. And so the honors college one, it was supposed to be for any semester I was taking an honors class, and it would basically be paid for that. So I was taking the honors class for free. And so these two added up for that total, and I was expected to pay maybe 22,000 left or something. So this was my initial options that I got from the schools. But a big part of my process was going through Education USA in Lagos, in Nigeria. So the American embassy there had a section that was dedicated to students. And so I got to see advisors that told me about the whole process, from taking my SATs all the way down. They introduced a mind-blowing idea to me, but it was that I could actually go back to these schools and renegotiate. And I don't know, coming from my background, it didn't feel like something that I would be allowed to do, and it felt like they would take it away from me. But really, I went back and I negotiated with some of them. And it didn't work for the University of Cincinnati, but it worked with USF. And USF gave me an additional 6,000 for the 4 years, which is about 1,500 for each year. And broken down, this brought my total cost even lower. And so with this, I was pretty set on which one to go to just based on the money alone. And so it also showed me that they were giving good investment towards international students and towards me. It felt like it was really personal, and they really wanted me to be there by reviewing my case and reviewing it upward, really. I felt like I was early high school LeBron trying to sort the best contract for myself. So I went to Tampa, started at USF feeling like a really valued student. I was in honors college. I maintained my 4.0 for that year for the first time. And the only year I got my 4.0 really, because before other things came up. But I found small things to avoid some costs. So for example, health insurance for international students is usually mandatory. Like, you won't be allowed to register if you don't have any health insurance. And coming from a different country, like, the systems don't really interchange and they don't overlap in any way. And so I was on the school's health insurance for like the student health center. And I just assumed that was the way things had to be. And it was only when I talked to some other friends from Nigeria who had found private insurance that allowed them to pay about 500, 600, 700 a year when the school would have asked me for 2,000 or more a year. So that was one of the big early life-saving tips I found. So find out what your health insurance is, if it has to be from school, or if they give any considerations for you to have a private one, and kind of check what you have to do for your own health needs, make sure that it covers that. But on the whole, you can find private insurance that's way cheaper than any school insurance that's offered. That was my first lesson of freshman year, and that was a big deal for me then. Overall, for freshman year, I had to cover $20,000, and it was a lot, but it felt like I had still got a good deal at that point. During the time I was at USF, unfortunately, the Naira crashed in spectacular fashion, and it went from trading to $1 about 150 to trading at about 350 by the time I left. Honestly, it was ridiculous, and it was really scary because I know people had to leave school at that time, and it really takes a toll on your mental health that you don't know what's coming next and things may not be for sure anymore. And so at this point, I really was on the hunt for anything that I could do to cut costs and make sure that I was continuing in school. One of my first involvements in school was being in hall council. Knowing about hall council meant I knew about housing, and I was introduced to this position called being an RA. And so in the position of an RA, you go through an application process. It's really selective. It's really sought after. Lots of people apply for it versus the number of spaces that they have. But being an RA means that you're living in a floor, you're kind of in charge of about 30 students, you're planning events, checking up on maintenance issues, building issues, you are planning events for the community as a whole, making sure people have a good community among themselves. You have to resolve their fights at some points as well. It was technically a 20-hour per week job. And in that, we had meetings every week. You would probably have a duty shift when you would have to walk the buildings and just check on everything and be on call. You had a special phone for it and everything. With the RA position under housing, we would get our housing paid off completely, and we would get a meal plan as well. And that was really the deal that they had. At different universities, you might have all of that in addition to actual cash given to you as an RA on top of your housing and your meal plan. So depending on the university you're at, it may be a different deal, but yeah. And so it was a huge benefit, but it was also like a lot of work. And I stayed an RA from my second year to my fourth year. And so given that the RA position would be paying off my housing and all of my feeding, I was paid off, and that was a huge weight off of me, knowing that I didn't have to pay this much just for food. So with this newfound involvement, my total compensation for that year kind of went up and down depending on where I was living. But with my RA compensation of about 11,000, when you put it all together, my meal plan and my rent, plus all my scholarships from before, which were about 13,000 for that year, I had total compensation and scholarships that year of $24,000. This means that I only had to cover about 5,200 for an entire year when I had summer classes, spring and fall for 2015, 2016. And so that was a really good deal for that year. But I still wanted some more. I wanted to see how low I could get this number. And so throughout that time, I had already been fishing for scholarships and more scholarships. So I had gone through the Alumni Association, the engineering department. They would send out emails on their own that would tell you when scholarships were opening, which was more often towards the end of fall. And then you would be awarded in the spring for the next year. And so about November, December, you know those were opening. They'll be closing about January, February. And then you would know for the next year, which would start in August. And so with that, I was able to find a few more, try to apply. I know I applied as early as freshman year, but I hadn't got any in my first or second year. And so I kept looking for them and being on the hunt for them. So one good thing I would say is like read every single email that comes to you, because these are where these things come through. And if you let them slip, then I don't know what to tell you. But also with scholarships, I would say the big thing is just apply anyway. And you might feel like you don't meet the 100% requirement of everything it states. But the thing with scholarships is that if nobody applies to them, they're still going to have to give this money away to somebody. And so that might as well be you, who is the one person who applies to it. And so just doing the work of researching, digging and finding them, and then doing the work of actually applying to them. Unfortunately, you have to do all the essays and things like that, the cover letters, the resumes. So just do the work for it. The worst that's going to happen is you get a no. And the best is you get more money, I guess. So doing these through almost any avenue. You could have scholarships that are major specific, that are like culturally specific, usually for minority scholarships or things like that. You could go through professional associations. So if you know your major has a general national professional society, then they could be offering ones for your major at any school nationwide. The school itself has scholarships because you have alumni or different people who bring money into the school that want to set up scholarships. So like the Alumni Association and USF had a general pool of scholarships as well. So there are different sources that you could find them. People say there's scholarships everywhere. I don't know how true that is, but there's a good amount that you can find if you know where to look and if you dig and if you follow through and apply to them, you'll be surprised what you get. So I'm saying this because this is exactly what I did. And in my third year, I was granted a scholarship from the College of Engineering. So this was a scholarship that was a one-time scholarship. It was just going to be for that year. And it was $2,000. So it would have been split like $1,000 for each semester. So this means that my total scholarships were coming to $16,000 for that year. And I still had my RA compensation. And so in that year, I think I lived in 2 different residence halls. So the rents were a bit different, meaning that I had a different amount of compensation from being an RA technically. But altogether, it meant that I had about $30,000 altogether that was coming from compensations and scholarships. And with this, I think I only had to cover about $3,000 or something like that, which is just like a godsend at that point because it was kind of tough at that point, even though I had got my scholarships and everything as high as ever. It was honestly still a struggle just to pay that $3,000. And I ended up going to some services that we had in our school. This is also something that you can have and to look out for any services that are aimed at making sure that students graduate. And so I literally had to get them to cover like $100 that was outstanding just to let me register for classes that year. Because I just didn't have any way to pay that, and it was registration time and I had to get my classes, and it just gets really stressful. So I was able to know about these resources. So if you know that your school has been going through efforts to make sure that students are graduating, your school could have a system or a program where they assist students to get them to graduation. That's if you're closer to the end, if you're in the third year, fourth year, they usually are able to give you some funding if you can tell them that you won't be asking it for every semester if it's just a one-time thing. And I think for me, it was a one-time thing, and I was able to get my little amounts just to push me over the edge. Even though I had all the funding already, it was still quite difficult. Going into my fourth year, I had continued my search for scholarships, and this time I found an Institute of Black Life Scholarship. So this was under the Africana Studies department, and it was kind of culturally geared, so for Black students at the school. So with this one, it was a $500 scholarship for the year. It still meant something in addition to everything else. I had kept on my RA position, and I had kept on my recurring scholarships. And so I had a pool of scholarships at this time. The total compensation for my rent and my meal plans came to about $10,000. With my old recurring scholarships and the new little $500 one, I was about $13,000 up in scholarships, meaning that for this year I had about $23,000 covered. And I believe I covered around 5,000 plus in that time. This was also another year that I had taken classes in the summer, in the spring, and in the fall. So it was a lot. I think I had to retake a class because I actually failed one. And so failing classes will cost you, honestly, unfortunately. You might have programs where they strike out some failing grades just for your GPA, but it might not hurt your GPA, but it'll definitely hurt your pocket when you have to retake them. So don't retake your classes like I did. I really hadn't been keeping up with all of the numbers. I felt like all of that tuition and stuff. It was just something that I needed to get done and not look at it anymore. I just hated looking at everything. But preparing for this video, I actually went back and added up everything. And it turns out that in my entire stay for my degree, I must have spent about $34,000, which means that my scholarships, my positions, and everything gave me compensation that helped me to cover so much that I spent as much as I should have spent in 1 year spread out over all 4 years. So I could have spent like 4 times as much as this on my entire degree, but finding all of these opportunities helped me to keep my costs at the complete minimum, honestly. I just did this to show you that there are opportunities out there that you can find. Just playing your cards right and digging into opportunities, it can do so much for you. And it did a lot for me, and I hope these tips helped you. And so kind of in summary, I would say before you apply, select the right schools, let it be within your budget, and let there be an actual availability of scholarships there. When you're in there, look out for health insurance, for things that you can find to make it cheaper. When you are there, you could find opportunities, paid opportunities within the school that can give you both involvement and compensation that would help you. I know some student government positions tend to be paid. The housing positions are often compensated in some way. So even if you're not getting actual cash in hand, you're getting benefits that reduce your overall costs. So you don't have to pay rent, you don't have to buy food every week, for example. These are really big things that can help you. And look out for scholarships. I hope these tips have been able to help you and you can put these to use. If there's any other way that you know about finding scholarships, feel free to comment. If there's anything that you would like to see come up in the next videos, let me know in the comments as well. And let me know how you covered your education, the things that you did as well. Remember to subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.